When you think of words like hopefulness or optimism, you probably don't think of scenes like these. For many, the idea that the horror genre could be defined by hopefulness and optimism might sound like pure clickbait. A video essay by some YouTuber who's just making a stupid claim to get more clicks. But in this video essay, I'm going to show you why I think this claim is absolutely true and accurate, and why more people should open themselves to the intensely hopeful, optimistic, and yes, even uplifting themes found in all truly great horror games. Also, I make a lot of videos like this, and if you want YouTube to show you more of them, be sure to click that subscribe button. If I had to think of the most visibly optimistic video game genres, it's hard not to land on the JRPG genre. If you've ever played these games, you know how cloyingly sweet and straightforward the storylines in these games usually are. There's almost always some obviously, unequivocally evil bad guy who wants to take over or destroy the world, and you and your band of friends need to come together to defeat them and save the world. There's plenty of tear-jerker moments of some party members sacrificing themselves for the greater good, or when the protagonist needs to overcome their personal fears or trauma to rise to the occasion and defeat evil, and when it's all said and done, the bad guys lose, the good guys win, the world is saved, the end. Think of Dragon Quest, Persona, Final Fantasy, your Chrono Triggers, and Xenoblades and Golden Suns. All amazing games, don't get me wrong, but when it comes to optimism, pretty cheesy. Look, when I was a kid, I couldn't get enough of these hero slays the villain stories. They really spoke to how I interpreted the world as a kid, who didn't really know much about what true evil was, and how hard the world could really be. As an adult, now I usually tend to find these straightforward good guy versus bad guy stories to be kind of childish. That's just not how the world works. In the real world, the lines delineating the good guys from the bad guys are frighteningly vague and fraught with a moral gray. Final Fantasy is notorious for naming the bad guys something so ridiculously unsubtle that even a fourth grader would know, that's the bad guy. There are plenty of final bosses with names like Chaos, or Sin, or X-Death, or Death Guys. That's not to say these games aren't incredible, they are. And I'll always cherish memories of beating the Ganondorfs and Bowsers and Albert Weskers of the world, and not needing to wonder if they're really just good guys with a rough upbringing, or if they actually had a good reason for doing all those bad things. There's usually not a lot of nuance there. There's usually no real question of who's actually good or evil. The gray areas of life that you and I must wrestle with in the real world every day. In that sense, while the JRPG genre is rife with the hero protagonist overcoming evil to save their friends, the optimistic themes I see in these games don't really resonate with me as an adult. As someone who's been around the block a few times, who's seen the headlines of kids starving in the Gaza Strip, of overcrowded euthanasia clinics in Canada, of rampant unemployment and homelessness crisis all over the world. While I love so many JRPGs I mentioned earlier, that kind of childlike optimism can be refreshing and simple, yes, but it's just not a story that can truly inspire me much anymore as an adult like it did when I was a kid. But you know what stories do inspire me as an adult? Like the ones that help me be brave when I hear a bump in the night, or when I reach the end of my rope after a barrage of terrible news at work, or reading all about yet another awful global crisis. The stories in horror games. Horror games have the stories that, for me, have been the most effective at making me braver, stronger, and more able to face the very real fears and monsters that exist here in the real world. The hopefulness and optimism found in all truly great horror games is almost never superficial or cliché. The subject matter in horror games is some of the most brutal and sobering material you can find in media. And to rise and meet these challenges requires wide-eyed acceptance and utter commitment to facing and overcoming these pitch-black themes. How does a parent reconcile the loss of their missing spouse, like in Resident Evil 7 or Silent Hill 2? Or the loss of their baby, like in Resident Evil 8? How does someone face forced impregnation, like in Silent Hill 3 or Hunting Grounds? How does someone face losing their own body piece by piece? Like in I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, or Look Outside. By definition, the genre itself deals with the most horrifying subject matter that can be dreamed up, and it can be hard to imagine anything like hope or optimism being found anywhere in this genre. But it is in these darkest settings that make the brightest and most hopeful resistances possible. We need not dig into our deepest self unless we were required to by the most unforgiving and merciless obstacles. Imagine the kind of dedication and resilience it must take a character like Leon Kennedy in Resident Evil 2 to keep going in that world. His first day as a policeman, and all of Raccoon City falls apart, killing thousands of innocent civilians that Leon as a police officer swore to protect. He's chased mercilessly by terrifying zombies and hunted endlessly by the unstoppable zombie juggernaut, Mr. X. How can someone like that, a rookie police officer with a little handgun, trapped in the most dangerous and terrifying city in the world, keep fighting for what's right, risk his life to save those he's only just met, and never give in to despair or hopelessness? How does someone like that choose to continue braving deep, dark hallways far beneath the Earth's surface, where every corner has some new monster lying in wait to kill him? That's optimism. That's hopefulness. That's something that inspires me. And in all truly great horror games, the protagonist exemplifies this level of courage and bravery in the face of truly horrifying and overwhelming odds. How many necromorphs were waiting on the USS Ishimura in the original Dead Space? Yet the protagonist, Isaac Clarke, chose to battle them anyway for the fate of humanity. How many nightmare-inducing animatronics were trying to kill the protagonist in every single Five Nights at Freddy's game, yet you as a player character continued through anyway to try and rescue the souls of countless young children trapped in the animatronics? As the young and inexperienced preacher in the excellent Faith, the Unholy Trinity, how many times could you have turned away from the terrifying demons awaiting you from your failed exorcism, yet you as a player character went back anyway to try and save an innocent young family? It is against the darkest terrors that the brightest courage is required. It's where the highest levels of hopefulness and optimism are found, even if you can't imagine how the world could ever be healed again after what you've been through. That's the kind of optimism that can inspire me as an adult. One of my favorite authors, Ryan Holiday, recently wrote, quote, "One of the reasons I find so many modern novels boring and end up quitting most prestige television is that everybody sucks. Nobody is trying to be good." End quote. This quote really resonated with me, and I couldn't help but agree. I've always been drawn to the hero archetype, the lone fighter willing to do whatever it takes for their loved ones. My favorite books are adventure novels like The Three Musketeers and The Lord of the Rings. My favorite movies are films like The Dark Knight, Gladiator, and The Departed. These pieces of media feature a protagonist that is unabashedly, unapologetically earnest and honest. I once heard a critique of how J.R.R. Tolkien portrayed his character Aragorn in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and how Aragorn was too simple, too obviously good, and that made him a boring character. I vehemently disagreed. In a world where most TV shows, books, and movies heavily feature main characters who are, well, mostly just a bunch of selfish douchebags, honest and earnest characters like Aragorn stand out among the crowd of assholes. In my experience, so many of the most iconic and recognizable protagonists in horror games fit the same description. Think pretty much every protagonist in the Resident Evil series: Leon Kennedy, Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Ethan Winters, even morally gray characters like Ada Wong or Barry Burton ultimately choose to do the right thing when they could have betrayed everyone else and saved themselves. How about Isaac Clarke from the Dead Space series, who never gave up on saving the world or those he loved, even when continuing to fight meant almost certain death? He had 1,000 chances to just give up, grab what he could, and run away, but he never did. He always put Earth and humanity first, even as a deeply flawed and broken man. I didn't like the Alan Wake games, but damn it, no one can say Alan didn't care about helping others. And he was never duplicitous or selfish or chose himself over others. No one is gonna say that James Sunderland from Silent Hill 2 is a good dude. But the game literally punishes him with manifestations of his guilt the entire game, as he is forced to reconcile with the evil he's done so he can finally achieve some semblance of personal forgiveness and closure, giving him a chance to perhaps be better with the time he has left. I'd want to grab a beer with any of these protagonists I just mentioned over anyone in any season of like The White Lotus or Succession or Mad Men, where every character is morally compromised in some way, and the whole point of the show is for the audience to determine who's the least terrible and who's really the worst. To be clear, there are plenty of dark, violent, and scary horror games like what I just mentioned. Games like Manhunt, Until Dawn, The Quarry, and even the Outlast series that all heavily feature characters who are usually fundamentally selfish, uncaring, or manipulative. But like most prestige television shows, or just about any modern true crime novel, these pieces of media have never left me feeling any kind of hope or optimism or encouragement. Stories that feature an ensemble of douchebags may be what most audiences seem to prefer and consume nowadays, but just because something is popular doesn't mean it's good or good for you. The truly great horror games almost always feature honest, earnest heroes who, despite seeing the absolute worst that mankind is capable of, still fight tooth and nail to save the world anyway. These characters remind me a lot of Samwise Gamgee's famous speech in Lord of the Rings, when they had almost reached their breaking point and were about to give up on their quest to destroy the ring. But Sam tells his companion Frodo Baggins about why they can't stop fighting no matter how dark and hopeless the world feels. It's like in the great stories, Mr. Frodo, the ones that really mattered. Full of darkness and danger they were, and sometimes you didn't want to know the end. Because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass. A new day will come. And when the sun shines, it will shine out the clearer. Those were the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think, Mr. Frodo, I do understand. I know now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. Because they were holding on to something. That there's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo. And it's worth fighting for. This is what protagonists in most horror games feel like to me. This is how they think. No matter how many unspeakable human experiments the Umbrella Corporation conducts on innocent victims, no matter how many people have been turned into necromorphs, no matter how many zombies or monsters or ghosts or demons are taking over the world, there's always a reason to fight. Even if you're alone. Even if the odds seem overwhelming, insurmountable even. Even if the mere attempt to fight back will probably cost you your life, it's worth it to keep fighting for the remaining good that's left in the world. I don't like stories that just seem to crap all over the remaining good left in the world. Stories and creators that paint a picture of a broken world beyond saving, where everyone's last remaining motivation is to save their own skin at the expense of others, where no one cares about their neighbor and is only interested in taking for themselves. This is not the horror genre. On the contrary, the horror genre routinely features the most adamant, resilient, courageous, and selfless protagonists who are willing to die for people they haven't even met because it's the right thing to do. For them, no amount of money or power is enough to hurt innocent people or sell out humanity. For them, anyone that believes the opposite must be stopped no matter what. There's no way around it. The world can be a very dark place. The reason I don't follow the news or have social media anymore is because I've come to believe that the mainstream media has discovered that if they keep reminding people that the world can be a dark and scary place, they'll get a lot more money. And that's what they do. It seems like every time I catch even a glimpse of a news anchor or even just a headline on a news site, it's someone breathlessly yelling at me at how much worse things have gotten since I last looked. People are afraid out there. They have reasons to be afraid. And when people get afraid, they get angry. They usually want something to blame, something to name as the enemy. That way, maybe they can fight back. But in most cases, the enemy here is difficult to understand, even to comprehend. The other day, my 5-year-old asked us, "Mommy, why does war happen?" Those kinds of questions are endless. How do we solve homelessness? Why are people dying of preventable diseases? But news sites will try to answer these questions anyway, because people who are scared and angry have a tendency to read and watch more things that make them more scared and more angry, and when they're doom scrolling through all this, they can be advertised to. That might sound cynical, and I hope that's not how the world really works, but sometimes it just feels like the only possible explanation. Look, I'm not here to say the world isn't a dark and scary place sometimes. That's one of the things you're forced to accept when you're an adult or when you're a parent. When your boss lays you off with no warning, they might feel bad, but it doesn't change the fact you just lost your job. No amount of crying or angry emails can change their mind, and that's just your new life. Every one of us is susceptible to scary diseases and illnesses. No one has absolute job security. And look, I say all this not to scare you, but to tell you the facts. That way you can accept them and hopefully find the strength to go on anyway. The author I quoted, Ryan Holiday, recently had another nugget of wisdom that really filled me with hope. When speaking of how the Stoics of ancient times tried to use adversity to become better, they weren't trying to simply find the silver lining in an utterly devastating situation, like a life-threatening illness or the death of a loved one. Quote, "It would be insane and insulting to say that terminal cancer was an advantage. Was there a way for Marcus Aurelius to spring forward after he buried another one of his children? Seneca, another Stoic, can say that hard times can be softened, but he didn't have to live like Epictetus, another Stoic, not just through slavery, but with the crippling disability from the torture he underwent at the hands of his master." What Holiday is saying here is that dark and scary things aren't a way for us to just try and make believe that things will get better somehow. They're a chance for us to practice virtues in the face of unexplainable, terrifying blows from an unfeeling world. Holiday goes on, quote, "The opportunity the Stoics saw inside adversity, big and small, was the opportunity to practice virtue. That is, it was a chance for them to rise to meet an occasion, to do the right thing, to be magnificent or magnanimous, even when they were heartbroken, even when they were being kicked around by life, even when they were dying." Now, what does all this have to do with horror games? In my experience, the intense hopefulness I've seen at the heart of most truly great horror games can't help but help me to pull myself out of dark places in my own life. Look, it might sound silly, but just seeing horror game protagonists experience such utterly terrible and terrifying situations and choose to courageously fight back anyway, it just always fills me with a sense of hope and courage in my own life. There is no such thing as necromorphs in the real world. I mean, God, I hope not. And watching some pixelated CGI protagonist in a video game shoot these make-believe monsters with a laser gun might feel like pure fantasy, with no connection to the real world. But for me, just seeing someone fight against such formidable, overwhelmingly powerful, and terrifying enemies that literally attack the corpses of your friends and turn them into monsters against their will, it always filled me with a sense of hope that if they could keep fighting, so could I. Honestly, I'm pretty insulated from the worst terrors of the real world. I'm a white, straight, educated American man. I have enormous privilege, and I don't take that for granted. But part of being who I am, where I'm from, and where I live simply helps preclude me from experiencing some of the worst things out there, like racism or sexism or homelessness or starvation. But even if I'm not fighting for my life in some war-torn country, life can still be brutal sometimes. This is true for all of us and anyone watching this video. You can never fully insulate and protect yourself from getting sick, getting fired, or to never again experience the fear of what might happen if things started to go sideways in your life. Horror games remind me to fight against whatever is trying to bring me down, and remind me to be grateful for things I do have. Things could always be worse. Even at my lowest points, when I was broke, unemployed, with tens of thousands of dollars in debt hanging over my head, with no money or leads or a way out, it could have been worse. A lot worse, actually. When shit hits the fan, there's always going to be a temptation to just say, screw it, and let yourself become ruled by your basest instincts. To be dishonest to get ahead. To be selfish when you should have been helpful. Everyone can reach a breaking point when things get too hard, where it can be hard to think of a reason not to panic, to fall apart, and to just give up. Protagonists in most truly great horror games never think like this. They always continue fighting, no matter how much shit has hit the fan. Often, they're the only ones left fighting. To me, this is true hopefulness, and is the most hopeful and optimistic genre in all of video games. As an adult, it can be hard to find things that truly inspire you, to make you feel braver and stand tall against things that have scared you your whole life. But just the other night, when I heard the eerie noise of something bang against a shower door while I was asleep in bed, you know what my first thought was? Leon Kennedy would check it out. He'd probably be scared too, but he'd still go anyway. I know how silly that sounds, but damn it, that thought helped me as I tiptoed over to the bathroom, opened the door, and saw it was just a bottle of shampoo that had fallen over. Thanks for watching, and if you want to watch more videos like this, be sure to click that subscribe button.